What's really going on? Let me tell y'all. Yes. A conspiracy theory.
Hey, it's Guido. A quick note. We recorded this episode earlier in May after the dust had settled following the first 100 days of Biden's administration, so you won't hear us refer to more recent events like the war in Gaza or negotiations around the infrastructure bill. But you will hear us reflect on Biden's approach to domestic and foreign policy in a group chat that our producer described as the most unhinged so far. There's more to come soon, but for now, enjoy.
Yes. A conspiracy theory. Stick with me. Let's go.
We hate ourselves and we can't govern. Hello, I'm Guido Girgenti.
And I'm Amira Hassan.
And I'm Waleed Shahid.
And you're listening to Bloc Party, a show about the fight for the soul of the Democratic Party. We took a little baby hiatus. We had to launch some candidates in April, but we are back. Amira Hassan, Justice Democrats political director. How are you?
I am doing swell. Listen, I'm fully vaccinated. I'm gonna go see my family. I went to Zumba.
Wow.
I'm really getting my life back together.
Okay. You're on the way for, I'm not sure what summer we're doing. Waleed.
Guido's like, we're doing hot girl summer. And then changed his mind.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Waleed Shahid, Justice Democrats Communications Director. How are you feeling?
You know what my next year is looking like? Loki, Shang-Chi, Black Widow.
This is not, no...
Doctor Strange.
No unpaid for sponsored content, please.
I'm on the wrong show. This podcast was brought to you by Disney. Take all of my money. Take all of my money.
Wait, but...
Waleed, is that all? Are you sure?
Is that all that has happened recently, Waleed?
Yeah.
Are you sure the next year isn't looking like something else as well?
Oh, well, there's the Spider-Man movie coming out.
I know. Amir, I think you have to break the news. Amir, I think you have to break the news.
Yeah, I'm gonna break your news for you. There was a Bloc Party engagement.
Oh my God.
If you aren't on Twitter, you might have missed this, but Waleed Shahid got engaged. You want to tell us about that?
It's true. I got engaged to my partner, Emily, who proposed to me, and we're getting married next year. So that'll be fun.
Congratulations.
Something that seems like a personal story actually also involves some geopolitical mess. You want to tell us about some people trying to rain on your parade? Trying to shit on your life a little bit?
I guess the haters never leave you alone, Waleed. It's tough. It's tough to be you.
You think that you could only get positive replies?
This is supposed to be a happy day.
Yeah, on an engagement photo, but you forget that Twitter is a hellscape. I should have just left it on Instagram. On Instagram, none of this would have happened. But yeah, there were some racist tweets that Emily and I got about our relationship from some foreign policy hawks who are pretty high up in the Democratic Party establishment. And so I think there's an article coming about it very soon. So check that out in 972 magazine. But yeah, pretty despicable behavior.
Wow. Well, Waleed, it's been an intense first part of 2021 for you. Not only are you getting engaged.
Yeah, people are trying to primary my wedding.
People are trying to challenge your wedding. You're launching insurgent challengers to incumbents. We just released an episode with Odessa Kelly that we recorded in April.
My favorite episode.
It was great. If you haven't listened to it, it was one of my favorites as well. And you've been slogging through the first 100 days of the Biden presidency. Over the next few months, we'll be talking about the PRO Act and the infrastructure bill and some of the ongoing fights. But to start, I really want to be reflecting back on the first 100 days. It ended. We're in May now. How is the group chat feeling? Especially when you compare your expectations for this presidency, given what candidate Biden was doing in 2020, and how President Biden is stacking up.
I honestly feel mixed. On the one hand, I feel like Joe Biden is a person who was most well known in his career for supporting the Iraq War, supporting NAFTA, supporting the crime bill, and supporting welfare cuts in the 1990s. Now he is ushering in multi-trillion-dollar packages with the COVID relief package, the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan, and It is a very different Joe Biden from the Joe Biden of the 1980s and 1990s and early 2000s. But on the other hand, I saw Jen Psaki the other day.
The White House press secretary.
She said, this is the biggest, referring to the COVID relief bill. She said,
the plan that the Senate passed this weekend puts us one huge step closer to passing one of the most consequential and most progressive pieces of legislation in American history.
I don't really think we're on like LBJ, FDR levels. Like, slow your horses here. Why are you declaring victory that you're one of the greatest Democratic presidents ever? And all we've done is
get Amira back to Zumba and seeing her family. We're back to 2019 people.
No. And look, if there's anything to give credit for the Biden administration, it is, as a nation, we are doing very well compared to other countries on the vaccination efforts. Our support for other countries and their vaccination efforts is a different story, but, getting Amira to her Zumba is important.
Reopening yoga studios, getting the vaccine out.
Getting everyone a vaccine is difficult, but I feel mixed. The party has changed, Joe Biden has changed, but, he has not created Social Security or Medicare or done the Civil Rights Act, so, let's hold our horses here. I don't even know if that's the right English idiom. Is that hold your horses the right phrase?
Yeah, hold your horses. Keep your powder dry. Amira, what do you think?
Obviously, we're evaluating. It's sort of this 100-day reflection, but it really isn't just a 100-day reflection because, the Biden presidency, quote unquote, really started when it was obvious he won, right? I think that...
That Saturday in November when I drank champagne at noon. Yeah, I remember.
And I've been trying to compare the 100 days to what I was thinking then and what I was thinking about candidate Biden, the last 3 months or so.
The last 3 months of the general election?
The general election, yeah. We're not going back to the primary. You're not dragging me back to that war.
Good vibes only.
Good vibes only. I remember having this conversation with Waleed, after the Unity Task Force, and, Waleed was like, the task force really came out with great things, and, Waleed was super positive about it, and I was like, I don't know what the fuck you're smoking, but this shit is not gonna happen.
Amir was like, I don't trust anyone within 50 miles of Washington, D.C.
I think they would say anything to make sure that everybody's rowing in the same direction and we're beating Trump right now. And I think that the real situation is going to be after victory, right?
And then on election night, you two were flipped.
Yes. And I have to say, election day, there was some conflict. We were not seeing eye to eye.
Waleed was morose.
He was.
Hey, people within the left can have healthy debates without canceling each other. So
that's a beautiful utopian vision. Thank you.
we can change our minds about things.
I mean, it was wild because I think I tend to be much more of the not pessimist, but I'm always like, bro, I'll believe it when I see it. What are the outcomes? But I was very optimistic, even though the Senate results were in there. We lost a bunch of House seats. I was like, okay, y'all. I'm feeling hopeful. And Waleed was like, no.
You're talking about before Georgia.
Before Georgia. Right? Election, Biden wins, House lost a bunch of seats. Things are not looking good.
Yeah, I was very worried about Mitch McConnell being Senate Majority Leader and how he was going to veto every piece of legislation despite not representing the majority of the American people. And I'm still afraid of that happening with news that Democrats might not pass H.R. 1.
Okay, we got a whole section on that, let me tell you. I have a whole theory. But we'll circle back to that.
After the break, we'll talk about, the next year into the midterms. But before then, when I talked to progressive colleagues of mine in April as we were getting to that 100-day deadline and just asked how they were feeling, the thing I heard a lot, especially from folks who are a little bit older, is this is the best I could have ever imagined a President Joe Biden would be. Even as I think the left has been right to point out an increasing number of areas where we think the administration is unnecessarily conservative, punitive, nationalist. Is that part of what is structuring this whole thing, is that it's hard to imagine Joe Biden for who he is could have done better? I don't know if I'm convinced by that, but...
Yes and no. honestly, I was like, man, this man's gonna put Republicans in his cabinet. Like, that's where I was. So, in a lot of ways, yes, it's definitely better than I imagined. But then you look at just where we are in the confluence of different once-in-a-lifetime, nobody could have expected events. The pandemic, an insurrection. I feel like it's absolutely within reason to expect more and to not be like, here are all the flowers because you didn't put Republicans in your cabinet. Good job. Amazing. You're the best. We had a whole episode on me being like, I'm really celebrating this American Rescue Plan. It is good. But this is not about getting us back to 2019. I'm not trying to just get out of the hellscape of a pandemic.
After Joe Biden's joint address to Congress at the end of April, just a few days before the end of his first 100 days, there was a lot of comparisons to LBJ and to FDR after that. Chris Hayes, on his nightly show on MSNBC, said,
lots of folks on the left and a lot of folks on the right both agree that the scope and ambition of the domestic agenda Biden laid out was truly staggering. The huge COVID relief package, the massively successful vaccination effort, one of the best in the world after the U.S. has been an international laggard. Biden proposed a wide range of progressive programs, from a jobs plan and a families plan to a $15 minimum wage, and a change to labor law that would be the most significant pro-worker legislation since the New Deal.
Chris Hayes said that this was the end of the Reagan era.
The last 40 years of American politics have been dominated by the ideology and legacy of President Ronald Reagan and this succinct, defining quip.
I think you all know that I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Joe Biden's nearly 50 years into his political career. He has never been particularly on the leading edge of the left of his party. He has been a centrist through and through, a deal maker and a glad-hander. And he was also the guy who laid out the most ambitious Democratic agenda for a robust government safety net in generations, probably since Lyndon Johnson proposed Medicare. And not only was there no shadow boxing with Ronald Reagan, there was no real apology. There was no defensiveness. He was on the offensive.
Chris Hayes pointed to this part of the speech where Joe Biden talks about trickle-down economics.
650 billionaires in America saw their net worth increase by more than $1 trillion in the same exact period. Let me say it again. 650 people increased their wealth by more than $1 trillion during this pandemic. And they're now worth more than $4 trillion. My fellow Americans, trickle down. Trickle-down economics has never worked. And it's time to grow the economy from the bottom and the middle out.
What do you make of that?
It's kind of a big deal. I would have never thought that Biden would sound like, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, talking about billionaires and their wealth. We need to go bottom up. Who is that man?
I think this remark will be remembered decades from now as the equivalent of Bill Clinton saying...
the era of big government is over?
Yeah, definitely. For the Democratic president to declare the Republican Party's orthodoxy and ideology, saying it has never worked is the phrase he used, is just pretty significant. And maybe it didn't get headlines as much as other things.
That was the only thing I remember.
Oh, really? Okay, maybe it did.
Guido was like, what was the stand-up moment? I was like, this and only this. Can't even tell you the other stuff.
Did you feel like that's how it was covered in the press?
I think by the liberal press, I was blown away by how positive it was. I mean, maybe I should expect that. Mm-hmm. Is what you're saying, Waleed, that you think it is like an era demarcating moment? And this is when you would mark the Reagan era ending, like Chris Hayes is saying?
Yeah, definitely.
I know sometimes MSNBC sends a lift to your house to take you there. So come on, you can tell Chris what you think on the pod.
It doesn't matter what Chris says. Joe Biden says it's over. That is important. I don't know how to explain it. It's the president of the United States saying it.
The most conservative person who ran in the primary is saying it. That is the measure.
Yeah.
Didn't expect this at all. Could have never seen that coming.
I feel like it is appropriate to say that we're no longer in the Reagan-Clinton era of American party politics. But to me, I would date that at 2016. I think that really begins to end. And Chris Hayes gives Donald Trump credit, partial credit in his segment. I would give more credit to Trump, to Bernie, to Brexit, and to the mainstream economists who learned the lessons of the failure to deal with the financial crisis.
And which economist went on the press tour saying he disagreed with Biden's...
Larry Summers. We covered this. We covered this in March. You heard it here on Bloc Party.
Larry Summers is going on CNBC
Right.
and all
Right.
these financial television programs and being like, Biden might be going too far.
And that is...
Cry me a river, Larry.
Right, that is
Cry
a
me
decisive break where the Democratic Party is like, we don't care, we're not going to repeat the mistakes of the Obama era. I don't know that I would say neoliberalism is dead, which is maybe a different thing. Because neoliberalism is a worldview, it's ideology that has structured the way governments, policymakers think about markets and the state since the 1970s. In political science, I think what Biden did last night is...
Take us to poli-sci class. Let's go.
BA, Swarthmore College.
I'll take us there. I feel like what Biden did is like, it's the order shattering moment. It's when you like break the previous regime. We're not in the Reagan political regime. We're not in that constellation of ideas and alliances anymore. But it's not the like new consolidation of the new consent. It's not like, and then this is what the New Deal is. And people could push back and say, well, that's true for FDR. Like the New Deal was not fully formed. It was not fully defined in 1933. It wouldn't be fully defined until the end of the 1930s. So, this isn't like a criticism that Joe Biden hasn't inaugurated the Green New Deal order. I wasn't expecting that. I'll agree with it's the end of the Reagan era, but I don't want to overstate what that means.
Yeah, I think that in general, they're still very much like, no, we don't actually really want to do big government. We're going to do these big things. And then when it comes down to the implementation of it, we want it to be public-private partnerships. The eyebrows are still raised. There's a lot of fight ahead.
And nothing has passed yet.
And nothing, and nothing has passed yet. True. I skipped several steps.
Right. That's the other thing where it's like, the Reagan era might be over, but we have not fundamentally transformed American society and government and the economy and how these things relate to each other in such a way that I could say this is really a new era of policy and politics, right? This is a bigger government money cannon. Like that's what the 1.9 trillion COVID relief bill is. But if you look at the infrastructure bill, to bring it back to my hobby horse, there are direct investments in infrastructure, modernizing bridges, roads, hopefully more for trains. But then when you get to the climate specific, and Kate Arnoff wrote a great article about this in the New Republic, a lot of the climate specific stuff is still done through tax breaks. It's still done to vouchers for consumers who are gonna trade in a car. Markets are still central. And I did not hear a story from Biden. And even in that clip we played, you don't hear Biden telling a story about the government, the public sector is a leader, maybe the leader in certain moments of crisis, as I think it should be to do rapid decarbonization of the economy. You don't hear that reclamation of the value of universal public goods in the way that would really make me feel like neoliberalism is on its last legs. That the public provision of public goods is just becoming so popular, and the idea that we're gonna solve all of this by letting people compete and letting winners win and losers lose through the climate crisis, through a pandemic, that's what I would be looking for to make those kind of claims.
Yeah, and I think that you could put it into very real terms by just looking at how much money was allocated for the Climate Civilian Corps in Biden's plan. I don't think that they're at a place where they're like, we want to actually drastically expand jobs.
Yeah, and AOC and Ed Markey proposed $80 billion for the CCC.
The Civilian Conservation Corps is a really good example of glass half full, glass half empty. Glass is half full because this is a demand made by the Sunrise Movement, made by AOC, Justice Democrats, Ed Markey.
As Bloc Party listeners know from our Varsity episode.
And it was part of the Sanders-Biden task force agreements that AOC and Sunrise got a concession. This was not part of Biden's original climate plan. Glass half full. And then Biden included a smaller version of this program in his white paper on the American Jobs Plan. Glass half empty is that the proposal for the amount of money for the CCC doesn't even deal with the backlog of maintenance necessary for national parks today. And so it is a concession to the progressive left, to the environmental movement, to the squad, but it's not a full public sector union program. That said, like, this might be a galaxy brain take.
We love those.
The future of the post-Reagan era might not be exactly like the 1930s or the 1960s.
Probably won't be.
And nobody knows, what that looks like. But the only models we have is the 1930s and 1960s.
The dynamic that you just pointed out, I feel like is a dynamic that whenever I've talked to Amira over the past 107 days or whatever it's been, there's a kind of glass half full take on the policy, better than you expected, but then not what progressives would want. Isn't that right, Amira? I feel like that's what, every time I ask you about where things are going on the child tax credit,
Yeah.
I hear the glass emptying.
Yeah. Listen, I spent a whole podcast episode being like, this is a big fucking deal. This was an important moment.
The benefits are going to come monthly. There's no means testing.
Right. I was like,
look at this money cannon.
yeah, all of that. And now, recently, they very, very quietly hit the reverse on. So, first, let me say, in the American Rescue Plan, the COVID bill, it was temporary. We knew it was temporary.
Meaning the expansion of the child tax credit passed in the COVID relief bill was only a temporary expansion. It's just going to affect 2021 taxes for families who qualify.
Starting July through the end of the year. But everybody was told that they would make this permanent. And then they just very quietly said, actually, we don't plan on making it permanent. At first, they said 4 years. There was some pushback. Now it's 5 years of an extension in the American Families Plan. Not happy about that. Not good. We need to make that permanent.
This is where it might be helpful to talk about strategy, because I think this might be the moment in the pod where some listeners are like, well, should the left have fought harder during the first 100 days? We've already done an episode talking about what we think about the specific tactic of forced vote, so we won't address that. But in general, they promise, they take it away. My honest feeling, and this is not like a judgment about good or bad morally, it's strategic. I think Biden comms and Biden admin has done a great job sequencing things for their own benefit, for their own popularity. And I think that they've done that well with the left, which Amira can tell us about, and they've done that well with the right wing. I remember there was the first 2 weeks of March when the, quote, border surge, border crisis narrative was reaching the mainstream news. Then there was a leak of details about the infrastructure plan to the New York Times coming out on a Monday. I think we might have talked about this that day, and Waleed was like, good comms person, making good decisions, changing the news cycle. And I feel like they've done that a lot. They delayed the State of the Union until April, which I think in their mind they want this dark winter, spring to kind of be remembered as the Trump era, and they want us to remember post-vax, hot vax summer as the Biden presidency. So they delay the State of the Union to April. My take might be, I don't know that the left is strong enough, had enough numbers, had a big enough platform to force the administration to change the 100-day sequence that it wanted to play. Fortunately, there were, I think, a lot of concessions to the left that we've talked about within that. But, Amira, what I hear from you is they're promising things, they're reversing it, they're running the play that they want to run. And it's not everything is to our liking.
Well, I want to separate some stuff out because the COVID bill, obviously, I think just had very unique dynamics. It had a very specific deadline. It was addressing something very now and urgent. I think the dynamics moving forward with the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan is very different. I think that, there is no set clear deadline on these things. It's going to be a long few months. And I honestly do think that you're going to see a lot more fracturing and it's going to be a lot more fight ahead. So all the people who are like, we want to see progressives fight. I'm like, all right, buckle in because the show is about to start.
I see. So you're saying some of the glass half full stuff might have been concessions because they're like, we really do need to keep the party united on this COVID thing.
Yeah, 100%. It was a very unique package. First, I want to take a step back and talk about the comms thing, because I agree with you. I think their comms is great. I think they've been really good about making sure to not be antagonistic for no reason, right? Like, they're not Rahm Emanuel. They're not shitting on the left for no reason. They're not, like, actively trying to bully us. That would be a choice that doesn't lead towards any payoff for them. And putting plans together and being like, we will put in progressive priorities, but it's up to you to make sure it passes. That's been the Biden administration's Hill strategy. They're like, okay, we're down to include this. Now y'all go and figure out how to do it. But we won't actually support changes to the Senate. We won't use our bully pulpit, and we won't fight or lobby any members on behalf of these priorities. But we also allow y'all to figure that out. That's been their general hands-off approach. So they're putting things in front of us, but knowing that we don't have the power to make it happen all the time. So, I don't know. It's smart on their end.
I feel like we're also in a really strange quandary where the Sanders-Biden task force agreements are largely what is being proposed as the governing agenda, but Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, Senator Kelly, Senator Warner were not involved in those Sanders-Biden task forces and are now making their voices and their demands heard post the Biden governing agenda already being set. And so what you have now is Biden is like, I'm going to propose these things that I campaigned on, and largely what I agreed to in the Sanders-Biden task forces. Those 1, 2, 3, 4 Democratic senators who disagree, TBD. Just recently, Mark Warner came out against the PRO Act, and the PRO Act Biden has said over and over again that he supports. And so there hasn't been that many moments where the rubber has met the road there, where Biden is feeling the urgency of having to deliver, and then it becomes Biden's problem and not progressives' problem that Mark Warner or Senator Kelly or Senator Manchin or Senator Sinema are not on board. But at the end of the day, the buck does have to stop with Senator Schumer and President Biden on passing legislation before the midterms.
Waleed has been out there warning folks. There was an NBC article titled "Joe Biden is Proving Progressives Wrong and They're Loving It," where many progressives were quoted saying nice things. Representative Jamal Bowman said Biden has been incredibly responsive to the progressive movement. Bernie Sanders is quoted in the piece saying he has bold ideas for infrastructure, for climate change. And then you get to Waleed, quote, "A big worry among Democrats is that Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer give lip service to certain items, but then don't have a legislative strategy around it." Waleed's like the one person in the article saying, hey,
Preach, Waleed.
I'm just getting worried. And one thing I'll say about the Unity Task Forces is, the climate policy from that task force is what's being proposed, but it's also being proposed in the context of a nationalist, great power rivalry foreign policy with China, which is not what the Green New Deal movement wanted.
America's moving forward, but we can't stop now. We're in competition with China and other countries to win the 21st century. We're at a great inflection point in history. We have to build back better. We have to compete more strenuously than we have. The American Jobs Plan will put engineers and construction workers to work. IBEW members installing 500,000 charging stations along our highways so we can own the electric car market. Think about it. There is simply no reason why the blades for wind turbines can't be built in Pittsburgh instead of Beijing. No reason. None. No reason. And finally, American Jobs Plan will be the biggest increase in non-defense research and development on record. We'll see more technological change in the next 10 years than we saw in the last 50. Decades ago, we used to invest 2% of our gross domestic product in America in research and development. Today, that's less than 1%. China and other countries are closing in fast. We have to develop and dominate the products and technologies of the future. advanced batteries, biotechnology, computer chips, clean energy.
When we say Bernie Sanders lost and that had consequences, I think the way you're seeing Biden frame his foreign policy and the way that he's placing domestic economic policy and a decarbonization agenda within that, it, to me, feels very much like, yep, Biden won and Bernie lost.
The second international news, refugee caps.
The cap on the number of refugees the U.S. is willing to accept annually.
Well, candidate Biden had said that he would raise the caps from the historically lowest number during the Trump administration back up to, I think it was
in the 60,000s.
And then they reversed that. You know, people did not receive that very well. And you know why? Because refugee admittance is what radicalized suburbia, okay? This is where the resistance was born, in fighting the Muslim ban and Trump's refugee quotas. And the Biden administration, you know what?
You have betrayed the indivisible mobs who elected you and who protested the Muslim
And
ban.
a lot of members of Congress, clergy, a lot of faith groups really came out very strongly against this. And the Biden administration actually listened and very quickly reversed themselves on this. But I think where we ended is good, but I do worry about the fact that they even thought that this was a good move.
Waleed, what else? What else has not been going well in the first 100 days?
Joe Biden told Adi Barkan ahead of the general election that he would, Adi Barkan asked the question, if the vaccine was produced in the United States, would you make it available in a generic form to lower income countries around the world? And Biden was like, absolutely. And
It's the moral thing to do.
And this has been something the United States has been historically bad at, most infamously with AIDS drugs throughout the 1990s and 2000s. Because so many of the pharmaceutical corporations are based in the United States and they employ and buy politicians, they are really threatened by the generic manufacturing of life-saving drugs by countries primarily in Asia and Africa. So this has always been a major fight in international law in the United States. And there was some development today that seemed like there was some positive movement.
Before we recorded this pod episode, Ambassador Catherine Tai announced that the U.S. supports the waiver of IP protections on COVID-19 vaccines to help end the pandemic and will actively participate in the WTO's negotiations to make that happen. Obviously, that's a very exciting, good development. There's been a lot of pressure in the last couple of days that has led to this, but the devil's in the detail, and I'm still going to wait to see exactly what kind of support they're talking about and what little exemptions they're going to work their way in. I also think it's really important to note that pharmaceutical companies are projected to make nearly $40 billion in sales from COVID-19 vaccines just in 2021. So there's 40 billion reasons for them to want to fight this, and they are fighting it really hard.
The fucking government is paying these people to make the vaccines. We are investing in these pharmaceutical companies to make the vaccines. This is a public-funded enterprise.
Yeah, socialize the risk, privatize the reward, very real, definitely happening.
The other healthcare thing is there's a big debate, a big fight happening, being led by Bernie Sanders and 16 other Senate Democrats. And I believe there is support in the new Democratic coalition, as well as the Congressional Progressive Caucus.
An unholy alliance.
An unholy alliance.
But sometimes we gotta do what we gotta do, you know?
To call on Joe Biden to expand Medicare to Americans 55 and over, and to expand Medicare to include dental, hearing, and vision. And Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden have signaled that they would rather spend the money on continuing to subsidize private insurance companies on the Affordable Care Act marketplace.
This is what I'm saying.
Let me tell you, these motherfuckers are not even trying to lower prescription drugs. You know how many fucking times I've had to listen to moderate Democrats be like, no, It's not about coverage for everybody. It's about lowering prescription drugs. And now these motherfuckers are not even doing that.
That's what I'm saying. It's like we are taking a whole of government approach to climate change. To me, I'm like, yeah, the Reagan era is over. Wow, we're actually saying, these regulatory agencies have a role to play. It's not just about destroying them. But is neoliberalism dead? Is it a whole new era? Not when you have White House officials talking to E&E News and saying the U.S. is pursuing new forms of climate policy that rely less on federal leadership and is driven more by business. All right, I think we need a break. When we come back, we'll be talking about are Democrats doing what they need to do to win in 2022? Amira's gonna put on the tinfoil hat,
I got y'all.
maybe. See you for part 2.
Can't imagine anyone voting against the establishment of a commission on the greatest assault since the Civil War on the Capitol. But at any rate, I came for ice cream.
That's right.
And we're back with the group chat. Amira, Waleed. Politics is about more than policy, fortunately or unfortunately. It's also about winning. You gotta win the midterms to hold on to power. And 2022, hot wedding summer is just around the corner. Is the Democratic Party doing what it needs to be doing to give itself a good chance, a real shot at winning in 2022?
No.
How's it looking after these?
Well, if it was up to me, we would seize the assets of anyone who supported the insurrection and tax any donor to Josh Hawley or Ted Cruz at 90%. This is what
Wow.
people advocated to do to the Confederates in the 1860s, and I stand by that patriotic American tradition. Oh, and we would strip them of their voting rights until they pledged allegiance to the Union. So I am
Waleed
moving
Shahid,
the over...
the most consistent podcaster ever. Is there ever an episode he's on where we don't talk about... Where's the Lincoln quote? Drop it. Let's
People
go.
think,
Let's do the full
some
Waleed.
people out there on the internet think I'm a moderate. I'm like, do you listen to any of the things I say on the show? Someone get on my level.
This is why people stick around for part 2. It's like, all right, Biden's first 100 days, and we're back. How should we have crushed the Confederacy, Waleed? And what should we be doing to confront, present day elements of Confederate politics?
I don't think Joe Biden will do any of the things I have just said, but I'm willing to compromise.
That's the moderate part of it.
What's the compromise? Hit us.
Oh, I am really scared about... So HR 1, there's supposed to be a big democracy reform package that includes ending partisan gerrymandering, expanding voting rights, and getting big money out of politics. And that's just the democracy reform package. That will probably be one big package. That includes the For the People Act, but will also include the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
Got it.
But every month there's like a little New York Times story about how that democracy reform package is continuing to be punted down the road and continuing to be smaller and smaller and smaller. Like, it's even on the table that they might not address gerrymandering as part of this democracy reform package.
Amira just rocking back and forth with stress.
Now we're stressed. I'm ready to put on the tinfoil. Let's go with that.
People are like, the Supreme Court might knock this down, so why would we even try? And then meanwhile, what you are seeing in dozens of Republican-controlled legislatures across the country is the most egregious attack on democracy that our country has seen in decades. And they are preparing to do whatever they can to enshrine minority rule in our institutions. And so it's the meme of the person riding the bike where they put the screwdriver in their tire and then they fall over. It's just such a win-win for Democrats. It's not like a left issue. It's just like, can we have a democracy?
Small d democracy. Yep. Here's my take. Are you guys ready?
Yes, Amira. What's really going on here?
What's really going on? Let me tell y'all. Dems, are they purposely trying to lose the House?
Wow.
Yes. A conspiracy theory. Stick with me. Let's go.
Okay.
Manchin recently came out opposing HR1, S1, even though he was a co-sponsor last time around. Is there a rhyme or reason to what King Manchin does? No, because he's the king.
Oh, and opposing DC statehood. They
aren't doing anything on healthcare, despite it still polling as the #1 issue for voters, okay? So as it stands, like, I am really starting to suspect here that Democrats actually do want, especially Senate Democrats, actually do want to take off the headache of constantly hearing from progressives, we have a Dem trifecta, we demand outcomes.
This is the we don't like governing thesis. We hate ourselves and we can't govern.
We actually don't want to govern. Actually, what we want to do is be like, we are better than the insurrectionist party. And we're going to talk about how refugees are welcome here. We're going to talk about dreamers. But then point to the Republican-held House to be like, we want to do these things, but, the House won't pass that. So we just have to compromise and see what we can get in the Senate. And Biden had to compromise because he lost the House.
In this world, it's like they actually freaked out after they won Georgia.
Yeah. They're like, fuck. People are going to be like, we want
this is
things.
Real now.
They're like, we got to deliver on these checks. We're going to subtract $600 just for shits and giggles and make it $1,400. I'm not trying to relitigate this, but I'm just going to say.
We got to lay out some context. Mm-hmm. Right? Because it's not an even fight going into 2022.
Right.
Right, because part of what's happening here is that it's not like Republicans are not doing anything right now. They control a number of state legislatures, right?
Yep.
And they control the redistricting of, I think it's like close to 190 districts, whereas Democrats control the redistricting of
like 70.
70, 75.
And there was a story that just came out about how several swing district Democrats are retiring slash resigning because they're afraid of redistricting or they're seeking higher office.
Mass retirement's always the first sign of losing the House.
Right.
Yeah. The former DCCC chair is not running for Congress.
And historical context having nothing to do with how unrepresentative congressional elections have become is just generally the president's party tends to lose seats in the first midterm. The exceptions to that are rare. In 1998, Democrats gained 5 seats under Bill Clinton. In 2002, after 9/11, Republicans gained some seats, but generally you lose a lot of seats. The 2010 bloodbath. Another president who gained seats in a midterm was FDR in 1934, which I think is maybe the bridge between part 1 and 2 today is, in addition to your domestic economic policy maybe not being as big as it should be, not loudly putting up plaques of Joe Biden's work progress administration on every zero carbon bridge and train that you build, not only may you not be doing that, but also like what's happening with HR1, what's gonna happen with gerrymandering, are we gonna do nothing?
I also want to, for balance, say that Schumer said that he plans on getting HR1 done by August. But as Waleed mentioned, there's a lot of talk about what version that will be. And it's looking a little grim, It's not looking good.
And the Senate math is pretty difficult too, which is not something that is even HR1 related other than DC statehood. But, they have to maintain their Senate majority, which is also difficult.
There was an expectation, I think, earlier this year that when the John Lewis Voting Rights Act came to the floor and was filibustered, that could be a moment of shifting the Democratic Party around the filibuster and then opening the door to democracy reform. Is that strategy in tatters, or you're just worried that no one's really committed to doing what's necessary for that to actually matter and be real?
Personally, I always thought that strategy was wild. I don't like it.
Huh.
It was one of those like DC things that people
Crazy
say, and then it becomes, yeah, I think that in theory is still very much what people believe is going to be happening. I think that's the Senate strategy that's being sold to us currently. Schumer seems still very committed to that. That's what people are still saying is going to happen. But there's a lot of opposition that has been growing to the expansive, nature of HR 1. People are like, we should just do voting rights. We shouldn't actually care about gerrymandering. We should just make sure we keep the seats that we want to keep. We don't care about protecting small d democracy anymore. These are all things said behind closed door, and some of them said in articles.
Whew.
Amira is referring to an article by a Stead, who prefers to go by his first name only, where some leaders in the Congressional Black Caucus wanted to focus on voting rights and exclude other parts of democracy reform because it would make their districts more competitive in primaries, which is Cori Bush's fault, actually, not mine.
Well, it's not just about primaries. I think that there is a fear that if you have independent redistricting commissions and stuff, then there would be a chance that there wouldn't be guaranteed majority minority districts, right. And then that would mean there would be a lack of actual diverse representation. I think that's a fair thing to worry about, but I don't think stopping democracy reform is a good way to handle that.
Let's set some policy here.
Let's
keep working. Let's keep governing.
Let's keep workshopping that. There's ways to actually address that concern without putting a full stop to something that needs to happen.
I mean, you started with King Mansion. Eric Levitz wrote a piece about this in New York Magazine, going through the math on how difficult it is for Democrats to win in 2022 and then what they're not doing. And he also pointed to this Manchin quote of how am I going to push through changes to the rules of elections on a partisan line? After what we've been through and after this divisive election.
All right, this is where it all comes back, though. And I want you to include this, Guido. Don't cut it out like you always do.
No.
But how did West Virginia become a state, Senator Manchin? How? Nobody knows.
How? I don't know.
They broke away from the Confederacy because they thought Virginia was too pro-slavery, and they decided to create their own state without a constitutional amendment, which is what Joe Manchin is requiring of the District of Columbia today. Is he's saying that there needs to be a constitutional amendment to allow D.C. to become a state. But that's not how his own state became a state. His own state became a state by standing up to the Confederacy. Joe Manchin, remember your roots. Remember your roots.
But can I just say we didn't get to the most egregious part of that quote?
Please, take us there.
He has that whole thing about the insurrectionists, and he's like, how can we drive further divisiveness? Let's listen to the aggrieved white men that stormed the Capitol and had legitimate concerns. I mean, he didn't say that part, but it's implied, because he's like, we can't further break this country apart.
No, it was incredible.
It was incredibly awful.
It was, we can't do something about voting rights because it's such a divisive issue, and that's what led to the insurrection. And I'm like, oh my God.
I remember in early January, the day the coup happened is when, for me, I lost it in pandemic winter. As our producer Becca Rose says, no one came out of pandemic winter fully hinged. But I remember one thought I had that felt coherent over the next 2 weeks was pivoting everything to impeachment and then kind of impeaching him and then memory holing it. I was always we just barely survived. You've already won the election. You're about to take power with 50-50 in the Senate. And the other party is throwing themselves into a crisis of legitimacy before your feet. I remember Waleed said this.
Waleed was push them over the edge.
Push them over.
I was like, hell yeah. Push the motherfuckers over the edge.
He was like, they have nothing. They have nothing but lies.
Yeah, and Manchin is working harder. This is what his real project is. Joe Manchin is working so hard to rehabilitate the Republican Party and make them seem like a legitimate political party post-insurrection. And it is the most disgusting project I have ever had to witness. this is all he does. It's not even about policy. It's not about policy. It's not that he has fundamental disagreements. It's that he is trying to make the Republican Party a legitimate actor again, and he's like their stand-in, and it is actually pretty much disturbing. And if it means losing the House, that is a thing he's willing to do because he doesn't actually care about governance.
I feel like this is the contradictions are coming to a head, and Democrats are going to have to make a choice.
We understand that it's hard for a Democrat to win West Virginia. That's part of the broader unrepresentative nature of the entire Senate. I'm like, yes, Manchin is incoherent because to win West Virginia as a Democrat, you have to create a slightly incoherent situation. But what is the strategy? You're going to lock yourself out of power for 8 years because it's hard to win that one seat?
Yup.
That's where the Amira take comes from. It's like, certainly Manchin fully prefers not to govern.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So that he doesn't have to vote for anything. And then you keep winning election every 6 years.
One source of optimism is that there's basically two different kinds of swing state Democrats. There's Sinema and Manchin. But there's also Senator Warnock. Warnock knows that he was elected to do something on voting rights. And he talks about it all the time. And so I think there's really going to be tension between Ossoff and Warnock and Sinema and Manchin. Aren't they heading to another election very soon in Georgia?
Yep.
And I think they're going to have to deliver before that election. Otherwise, it's like, why did we just spend millions of dollars to elect these people who weren't able to deliver anything?
I think that's a really interesting dynamic always because I think Democrats love, Senate Democrats love to hide behind their swing seat people, especially when they have to take conservative positions. But there's been not anything to be like, oh, we have to make sure Warnock and Ossoff are taken care of and that they can actually say that they delivered on their priorities. I don't think that they are being taken care of the way that Doug Jones was catered to and taken care of, or Manchin and Sinema, who are quote-unquote swing seats.
Good consultant, bad consultant for Warnock. Warnock, you need to force the vote on voting rights. Warnock, it's a win-win situation.
That's a good consultant.
Yeah.
Am I right?
He has all the power in the world to do that.
Yeah. Him and Charles. I'm sure Charles Schumer would love to be forcing the vote on voting rights. He'd be all over TV announcing that.
Yeah, we got to do a whole segment on all the YouTube ads people in New York are getting on Chuck Schumer. I blame myself.
Speaking of New York, so y'all gonna rock with Yang Gang? What's happening there?
We got to end the show now. Let's end the show.
I just want to say, Amira, I work in federal politics because New York is too nasty. Let's just leave it at that. I chose the less dirty of the two.
Can I bring it back to my side job as Marvel PR, which is that if you want to know more about a future Yang administration, I would encourage you to watch Spider-Man starring Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, and Willem Dafoe, where Willem Dafoe plays Andrew Yang as...
That's why you heard it here first. The Spider-Man comics predicted the Yang mayorship in New York. All right, that's the show, folks. Amira, thank you for bringing the tinfoil hat, the takes, the updates. Waleed, congratulations again on your year of Marvel watching.
Hell yeah, brother.
Good that's happened to you. Anything else good happening in your life? All right. And to the fans who tweeted at us because the pod hadn't come out, thank you. Direct action does get the goods. And if you have any more thoughts, you can email us at blockpartypod@gmail.com. As always, Becca Rose is our producer. Leslie Gaston Bird is our mix engineer. Special thanks to Amy Westervelt. See you on the block.
Bye.
Bye.